He's a complete pathological liar.
Let's be honest. There are outsiders coming into communities, stealing and moving jobs away, and making life harder for people living there. And they have names: Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square. Lied about being a head coach of a football team.
Because this started, and I love this story, as a young prosecutor. Kamala Harris talked about going in that courtroom for the first time.
Pathological liars. People that are habitual liars. They just lie all the time about everything. Yeah. Oh, you didn't deploy for war. You didn't. Why are you saying you deployed at war? The weapons you used in war? No. You were in war.
I plan on waking up on November 6th with Madam President.
I want to be clear. You won't be waking up together.
No, you weren't a head coach. You were the water boy. The f*** are you talking about?
I thought some of that was weird.
He's just a liar.
Walz says Democrats hate success.
We as Democrats, we want people to pay their fair share, but why are we against people being successful like that? We can't be. Why are we against? We should talk about businesses. Not all businesses exploit their workers, and we get ourselves stuck in that.
Oh, well,
and
Governor,
I think we lose them.
Get a room. Oh, wait, they weren't in a room. Vince.
This is the guy that was rooting against Tesla stock.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the same guy.
No, it's amazing that
Something wild just happened on air and nobody was ready for it. Joe Rogan blinked twice. Greg Gutfeld nearly spit out his drink. And Tim Walz, well, he's probably still trying to reboot. This wasn't a debate, it was a demolition. What did Walz say that triggered both of them at once? And why is the internet melting down? Buckle up. This political circus just turned into a full-blown roast session.
I don't know. Tim Walz is out there talking again.
Did he say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools.
That was Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal.
What do you get when Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld walk into a conversation about lockdowns, mandates, and political gaslighting? Apparently a governor sprinting faster than his press secretary can spin. It starts slow. Rogan raises an eyebrow. Gutfeld leans in, and somewhere in Minnesota, Tim Walz's staff is collectively Googling how to disappear from the internet. This wasn't just a critique, it was a two-man comedy horror show. And the star of the spectacle? A man who managed to turn leadership into an Olympic-level event of flip-flopping.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away.
You haven't seen that? No. The video of him taking down the Minnesota flag and he replaced it with the new flag that looks a lot like the Somali flag. Minnesota has a huge population of Somalis in it.
Oh, wait a minute.
So he gets the flag, picks it up, moves it out of the way, and replaces it. Look at this.
There, that's better.
Why is that better?
I don't know.
First, let's talk about the legend himself, Tim Walz, the governor with a resume as chaotic as his pandemic strategy. Once a mild-mannered high school teacher turned political hopeful, he strutted into office with a smile, some Midwestern charm, and a pocket full of data-driven decisions. But oh, did that spreadsheet catch fire fast. One moment he was following the science, next he was freestyling public policy like a jazz musician on 3 espressos and no sleep.
Kennedy, I like it. Like, what a better way to show their opposition to successful people than making him VP. He's the best example of failing up.
Yeah, and he didn't even do good at failing up because he helped tank the ticket and she lost the race because it showed, Tim Walz is the best example for why Kamala Harris has the worst political instincts in the Democrat Party, which is, it's a low bar. But
before the chaos, he looked like your friendly, approachable neighbor, the kind who waves while overwatering his lawn. But when COVID hit, it was like he took every rule book, tossed them in a blender, and hit puree. Locked down the gyms, closed the churches, shut down the corner cafes, but wait, mass protests? Totally fine. Apparently viruses take a smoke break when there's a political message involved.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, welcome to the Capitol. It's great that you're all. Sir, you're welcome to come. Let me finish. Let me finish and vote.
Hey, sir, he doesn't have fucking votes, sir. Shut your fucking mouth.
This was a man who wielded emergency powers like Thanos with a PowerPoint. Every time people asked when it would end, he reached for another executive order like he was hoarding infinity stones. And the mask mandates. That was its own trip. Masks on, masks off, masks optional, masks required inside, unless you're standing still, singing softly, and wearing Crocs. He didn't create guidelines, he created riddles. And that's where Joe Rogan came in, watching from afar like a guy who just smelled something funky in the fridge. Joe's not exactly a fan of government overreach or happy politicians who pretend they're the only ones with Google. Why were playgrounds wrapped in yellow tape but liquor stores remained untouched like they had divine immunity? Watching Rogan break down the logic was like watching a bear gently peel a banana before smashing it anyway.
And he was 100% right with Tim Walz.
I know I'm doing something right when the Fox News crowd is all pitching at me like crazy. Like, I'm loving it.
That guy was almost the vice president of the United States.
Elon Musk was crying last week. Tim is being mean to me, basically, you know, like, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
He may or may not have cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb.
Yeah, Biden and Biden I was saying that I need a vice president.
And just when things were looking bad for Walz, here comes Greg Gutfeld sipping a cocktail of sarcasm and Red Bull. Where Rogan points out the inconsistencies, Gutfeld takes those inconsistencies, dresses them in clown makeup, and shoves them into a spotlight. His mockery was so surgical, you could hear political consultants crying softly in the background. Gutfeld painted Walz not as a man navigating crisis, but as a guy who saw a smoke alarm and tried to put out the fire with confetti. He laughed at the arbitrary rules, like when indoor dining was banned, but outdoor dining meant igloos with windows. Guidelines changed more often than his haircut. Businesses were told to hang in there right before being blindsided by new rules announced during a Wednesday afternoon press conference. It sounded like it was written by a confused intern and a magic 8-ball.
Hack at Politico writes this piece on the body language from the debate, claiming that it speaks volumes. Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them at Politico says it's like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes.
Rogan couldn't resist. He pointed out how the working class got hit hardest. Barbers, mechanics, personal trainers, basically everyone who doesn't work from a Zoom cube. Meanwhile, Walz and his circle carried on, untouched, unquestioned, and perfectly lit on every virtual call. And let's not even get started on the remote learning disaster. Rogan practically roared when he mentioned how kids got thrown into digital purgatory, while politicians' kids floated through private education like nothing happened. Gutfeld turned it into a comedy sketch. He acted like Walz had a wheel of fortune behind the scenes labeled, mandate, mask up, blame the feds, pretend everything's fine. And each morning, he gave it a spin while sipping kombucha. This wasn't some wild conspiracy theory, it was Walz's own record playing on loop, sounding more unhinged every time. And in case anyone thought it was just COVID, Gutfeld reminded viewers about the post-George Floyd unrest. Businesses burned, cities spiraled.
Have you ever seen that video?
No.
This is what people love about Donald Trump. The fact that he would say this.
But unfortunately, Governor Walz isn't here himself, but don't worry, he'll say that he was. He's going to say he was. I used to think the Democrats were crazy for saying that men have, period. But then I met Tim Walz.
It's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early.
Well, Walz spent more time searching for who was in charge than actually taking charge. It was like playing hide and seek with accountability. Rogan brought the numbers, crime stats, property damage, economic fallout. Gutfeld brought the punchlines. Together, they turned a policy disaster into a roast. You couldn't look away. Gutfeld saw it as government cosplay, where Walz dressed like a leader but delivered like a substitute teacher who lost the lesson plan. And the worst part, the people paid the price. Instead, he became the cautionary tale Rogan laughs about, and Gutfeld sketches into satire. And when your pandemic policy becomes the punchline for a UFC commentator and a late-night libertarian with a whiteboard, you might want to update your resume, or at least read your own executive orders before signing the next one.
Tim's odd greeting. The man of the hour, Tim Walz, brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her close and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh, yeah, weird.
And that's when Joe Rogan officially entered the ring. Not with a suit, not with a script, but with a pair of headphones and enough frustration to power the Texas grid. You could feel the sigh coming before he said a word, because while Tim Walz was busy inventing a new flavor of indecision, Joe Rogan was watching the whole circus unfold in real time, and his BS radar was pinging like a metal detector in a junkyard. Rogan didn't just point out the hypocrisy, he practically shouted it into a megaphone. Mom and pop shops were slapped with fines, boarded up or buried under red tape, while big box giants waltzed through lockdowns like VIPs at a pandemic gala. It wasn't science, it wasn't fairness. It was a rigged game where the rulebook changed depending on who could afford lobbyists.
We're getting scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures.
I think we need to push back on this.
Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hey man, you, because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago, it's on the front page of the New York Times now.
On his podcast, Greg broke it down with the kind of common sense that made people go, wait, yeah, what the hell was that all about? One episode, he pulled apart performative politics like a roast chicken. What looked good on camera rarely translated to practical sense. Walz's policies became the go-to case study. Like when Minnesota announced capacity restrictions that made less sense the more you thought about them. You could sit in a restaurant, but not at the bar. You could eat indoors, but not after 10 o'clock p.m. because apparently that's when the virus wakes up and gets frisky. Rogan's class warfare commentary wasn't subtle. It was a full-blown mic drop. There was real anger there. He mimicked the absurdity like a stand-up comic stuck in a Kafka novel. It's safe. No, wait, it's dangerous. Actually, follow the science, which we updated 5 minutes ago because we panicked after a tweet. You didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Joe made sure you did both.
It's amazing how they operate one way when they're running, and then when they lose and get humiliated, all of a sudden they have these solutions, and they're all the things we're telling you to do. Like, why are you trying to trash one of the most successful companies in the world, you moron?
And they never did that because they all used to love Trump when Trump was giving them money.
Yeah.
Then Trump became like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack.
Yeah.
He crashed their party, showed up at the White House, and he was just like, hey, you know what? We should put like a casino over there, an MMA ring over there.
And just when Walz's approval rating started to slide into the abyss, Greg Gutfeld parachuted in with a smirk and a flamethrower. If Rogan was the everyman with questions, Gutfeld was the snarky uncle at Thanksgiving who doesn't care what you think and brings charts just to ruin dessert. His strategy wasn't debate, it was demolition through sarcasm. His jokes didn't need a punchline because Walz was the punchline. He went straight for the emergency power addiction. Every time Walz extended them, Gutfeld mocked it like a guy stuck on a Word document font selection screen. He's not saving lives, he's just obsessed with Times New Roman. It wasn't leadership, it was theater. Bad theater. The kind you walk out of halfway through and demand a refund for. Gutfeld didn't just point it out, he rewrote the script with enough satire to send Walz's team into crisis mode.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a core. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems?
Then came the broader critique. Walz wasn't leading, he was LARPing as a leader, a blue state bureaucrat playing dress up while real Minnesotans were bleeding out financially. One sniffle from Fauci and Walz locked down the state like he'd just gotten a text from the apocalypse. There was no balancing act, just a default setting of panic. Gutfeld, knockout blow. Tim Walz managed to lose trust from both sides. Liberals think he's weak, conservatives think he's nuts. That's not balance. That's just being bad at your job. Game set, public trust obliterated. And then came the side-by-side breakdowns, press briefings versus Rogan and Gutfeld reactions, while stammering through another redefinition of essential. Rogan squinting like he's watching someone try to explain cryptocurrency to a toaster. Gutfeld interjects, it makes sense if you've been sniffing hand sanitizer and licking. The internet couldn't decide whether to laugh, cry, or send Walz a copy of Leadership for Dummies.
But whose expertise does he rely upon for his Midwestern takes? Here's Minnesota State Rep Leigh Finke, who wants to train more children's doctors on sex change surgery and puberty blockers. He sponsored the Trans Refuge Bill, which Walz signed, which makes Minnesota a sanctuary state for such butchery.
If you promise trans refuge, then we need to increase the number of people who are offering gender-affirming care. So we have some money, hopefully we can pass, to help entice people to move from those states who also practice gender-affirming care. We want to do internship programs and fellowship programs with Children's Minnesota and other places where people can learn gender-affirming care.
Wow. It's now available for babysitting.
The destruction wasn't loud, it was clinical. Not just a roast, a dissection. Every contradiction laid bare. Every ridiculous regulation turned into a punchline. And what was left? A governor standing in the political rubble of his own decision-making, wondering why people weren't clapping anymore. But this wasn't just about Tim Walz. This was about the erosion of public trust. What happens when leaders pretend to lead and then blame the mess on the very people they ignored? Minnesota's economy took a hit. Small businesses never came back. Polls started sliding. Approval ratings sank like a leaky canoe. And even loyal voters started asking, wait, we signed up for this? Other governors owned their mistakes. Tim Walz, still patient zero. Rogan never won for subtlety. Put the final nail in the political coffin. We're not saying don't lead, we're saying stop pretending you are. And just like that, a governor's credibility got body slammed by a podcast host and a Fox News comedian. Not with rage, not with hate, just with facts, laughter, and the kind of clarity only found when the fog of performative leadership finally lifts.